Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I thought we would make this elegant slimline card using the Grapevine from Art Impressions. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to use the Art Impressions slimline dies, and I'll use that fourth largest one here. For paper, I'm using the Paper Bag Lawn Fawn cardstock. This is a 100-pound weight, and I'm going to go ahead and run this through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. So now I'm placing it in my Misti stamp positioner. That'll just hold it in place while I do some stamping here. And this, we will need to stamp this twice. This panel is very long, so although this image is quite long, it's not going to cover that entire panel. So I'm going to place this down. I'll go ahead and ink this up using the Versamark Watermark Ink Pad, because we are going to be embossing this. I'm going to use some white embossing powder. But first I want to put down a little bit of the anti-static powder just to make sure that that embossing powder doesn't stick anywhere we don't want it to be. So I'm going to ink this up, and then I'm going to ink it up again. That's why I placed it in the stamp positioner, so I could ink it up a couple of times. I'm going to get plenty of ink on here. Now I'll just need to shift this panel. You could emboss this at this point, but since I can clearly see where I've already stamped, I'm just going to position this on an angle in my Misti. And don't worry that it's off the top there a little bit. It'll work out just fine. I just want to leave enough room here to stamp this image a second time. So I'm going to just kind of position that. And then I can go ahead and ink this up twice, just like we did before. Now again, you could emboss before you do the second stamping, whatever is easier for you. But I felt like I could see exactly where I had stamped before, and then I'll do my second stamping. So this ink is going to stay nice and wet until we do our embossing, and I'm using the Ranger Superfine Detail White embossing powder. So this will give us a nice crisp image. So I'm just sprinkling on that embossing powder, and I'll tap off any excess. And now I can go ahead and heat set this. Now I am going to try to heat up my heat tool here a little bit before I go to my cardstock, because I don't want it to curl too much. So I'm just letting it heat up, and then I'm going to the paper here. And when you're embossing the white embossing powder, you'll know that you've embossed it when it's got a little bit of a glossy finish to it. If it looks kind of grainy, then you know you haven't completely embossed it. I do like to let the paper and the embossing powder cool before I dust off any of that anti-static powder. So I've cleaned that off, and now I've got these gorgeous glitter pens. These are from Kaisercraft, and it comes in this adorable little case, so everything stays nice and organized. I really like when products come this way, because then you can keep everything together. And I'm going to grab some colors here. I've got a yellow and a green, a pink and a purple, and then 2 shades of brown. And what I want to do here, well, first I'm going to place my We Are Memory Keeper silicone mat down. That'll just kind of hold my paper into place a little bit better. It won't be sliding around as much. And I've got the yellow and green glitter pens. And these are very wet. There's something about these glitter pens that it's very unique. I think they're just very wet and very easy to blend. So I actually am going to do some blending with these pens. So I've laid down a little bit of that yellow color, and then I'm coming in with some of the green. And then what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll actually do some blending with these. Now you can refer to the indexing on your packaging to see where these little images are. It's kind of hard to tell when you've embossed it. So I refer back to my packaging just to see where these images begin and end. So here I'm going back with that yellow, and I'm going to start to pull these 2 colors together. And if you do it while the ink is still wet, you can easily blend these colors together. Now I'm going to add a little bit more of that green glitter pen, and then I'll come in with the yellow and blend these together. and you get this absolutely gorgeous blending of colors. Now, it's certainly not blending like your watercolors were, but you are getting some blending here. And I kind of call this my faux glitter technique because it looks like you took the time to put glue and glitter each of these little areas. And really all it is coloring with these glitter gel pens. And I do think because they are in this nice plastic container, that's going to keep these gel pens nice and workable. Sometimes my gel pens dry out, but I think in this little case, they're going to stay a lot nicer longer. Now, there, you don't want to rub your hand across it. These are very wet, again, and it may be sitting up on top of that embossing a little bit. Don't worry about that for now. You do want to try to avoid the embossing if you can, and then, again, don't swipe your hand over top of it until it's completely dry, because you will smudge it. So for the little grapes, I'm using that pink first. I'm going to lay down the pink in all of those little areas. And then I'm going to come in with that purple color and just add a little shadow here. And again, I will be able to blend these because they are nice and wet. And again, you want to do this while, you don't want to let these dry completely or you won't get the same bit of blending that you do while they're wet. So now you can see I'm just going to pull that purple color into the pink just a little bit by using that pink color. So to do your blending, you want to use your lighter color pen. So go start light to dark and then back to the light to do your blending. And there you can just see how beautiful that and sparkly this is. It really is just kind of like you spent time glittering each of these little sections. So I'll just show you one more little area here. Again, just blending it out with that pink color. And I'll complete that all the way down. And then for the little branches on my vine, I'm going to use these two shades of brown. I'll start with that, again, that lighter one. And then I'll add a little bit of that darker just to add some shadows here. And then back to the lighter one to do my blending. So I'm going to work in small little sections here just to make sure that, again, the ink stays nice and wet while I do the blending. So here's the completed panel. And isn't this just so gorgeous the way you get that beautiful sparkle? Now I'm going to use my Jelly Roll white gel pen. And any areas where I've gone over the embossing with my glitter pen, I'm just going to fill that in with the white gel pen. I'm just going to correct those mistakes. So I'm going to just kind of touch up any area where I might have gotten that glitter gel pen on my white embossing powder. And that'll fix any of those little areas. And now again, I'll give you a closer look at that. And I just think this is so gorgeous. So now I've got a piece of vellum paper and I'm going to stamp my sentiment on here. And you can see that you can see through. So it gives you a really pretty soft effect. And I used the Lawn Fawn Pearlescent Vellum. And then for my sentiment, I went to the Sending Warm Hugs. And this is from this adorable little set. This is the Mr. set. And this just has so many cute little images for if you need to do masculine cards. But I thought that Sending Warm Hugs was just perfect. So I'm placing it again in my Misti stamp positioner. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp this. I'm just centering it on this piece of vellum. And again, I'm going back to that anti-static powder tool just to make sure that the embossing powder doesn't stick. And I'll go ahead and stamp this. Going back to that same super fine detail white embossing powder, and you do want to just flick off any excess. And then for the vellum paper, you do want to make sure your heat gun is nice and hot here at this point because your vellum could warp a little bit. So if you get your heat tool really hot, then you can kind of, and keep it moving when you get to your paper. Don't stay in one spot too long. Just kind of keep moving back and forth until you emboss that. And you will still get a little bit of that curling, but it won't be as bad. And then once it's cool, you can wipe away that anti-static powder. And I did decide to cut this down a little bit. I thought it was just a little bit too wide, so I'm going to take a little bit off each side here. To hide the adhesive, I'm going to just wrap this right around, and we'll put our adhesive on the back of this panel. So when you're using vellum, you do want to find different ways to hide the adhesive because it will show through if you don't. So I like doing this. I think it looks really pretty when you wrap it all the way around. It just gives it a really elegant look. Now I'm going to my Lawn Fawn cardstock, textured dot cardstock in the pastels, and I'm going to grab that really pretty lavender color. I'm going back to my Slimline dies, and you can see that's the one we used before, so I'm going to use the next one up from that size. Actually, here you can see I changed my mind. I'm going to go up 2 sizes from that one. I want enough of that little dotted pattern to show. So I've got the second largest die, and these dies have this beautiful stitch border all the way around. So this is going to be really pretty. So I'll run that through the Spellbinders Platinum 6, and it's a little bit too long. So I'm going to run it through the first time, and then I'll slide it up just a little bit here. And then I'll run that bottom part through again. Now I've got my cardstock, which measures 8.5 by 7 inches, and I'm going to score that at 3.5 inches. And that'll be a slimline card, which measures 3.5 by 8.5. So let's go back to that polka dotted panel that we have, and I'm going to use the Distress Oxide, the Villainous Potion from Tim Holtz. And I'm going to use one of my blending brushes just to go all the way around all 4 sides of this. And I'll add a little extra to the corners here. And you do want to take a little time to make sure that you kind of blot off some excess ink on your glass media mat first and then go to your cardstock. So because this paper is a little bit more absorbent, so you don't want to leave any splotches on your paper. So if once you kind of get the right amount of ink, you can go directly to your paper. But if you're not sure, just kind of tap it onto your glass media mat first, and then you can pull that ink up onto the cardstock. So once that's all set, you can see how pretty that is. And that just kind of will bring our eye into the center a little bit here. So I'm using my Tombow Mono Permanent Tape Runner, and I'm going to go ahead and center that on the front of the card. Now going back to that same Slimline die set, I'm going to take this one. This is kind of like a little bonus die that you get. It's a little banner. And this is really fun to use with your sentiments. But we're going to use it a little bit differently today. So I went ahead and die cut that out of some Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. And I'm going to just cut it in half and place it at the top and at the bottom of this panel. And you'll never know that it doesn't go the entire length of this panel. So I'm just going to use the 2 halves of it at the top and the bottom, and I'm going to center that. And also I should have mentioned earlier that I use the Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock to create the card base as well. That's a 100-pound weight. And I'm just making sure that I'm lining this up with the glass media mat just to find that center. So now I can go ahead and place this panel on here, but I did decide I thought it was a little bit light. I wanted to add some white layers behind it. So I'm going to go back and die cut 3 more of this panel. Now you could certainly pop it up with some foam tape. I'm going to use my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to attach these together. But what I wanted was that little white edge showing underneath here. So you'll see what I mean here in a second. And if you don't want it to be white underneath, you could go back to your craft cardstock or your paper bag cardstock to do this. But I wanted that white edge to tie in with that little banner that we have and with our card base as well. And also, again, this will thicken this up, so we'll have a nice thick panel for the front of the card. I'm just using my We Are Memory Keepers bone folder to press that out. And there's that edge that I think it looks really pretty. But again, if you don't want the white, you could use your paper bag cardstock there as well. So now we can go ahead and attach this to the front of the card. And again, I'm just centering that. Now I've got some really pretty sequins from Picket Studios. I couldn't decide. Those purple ones would go really well, and then this little sequin mix here would also go well, and that's called Icicles. And I will list and link all of the products I'm using today down below and also on my blog. So if you're interested in any of those, you can just check there. And now I did decide just to use these white ones from this Icicle set. There's different sizes of the white. There's some smaller and larger ones. So I decided just to keep the focus on that Grapevine by just adding the white instead of the purple. But I think either way would work really nicely. And then I've got some twine here. This is just kind of a lavender white twine. I've doubled it up and I'm going to make a little bow out of that. And I'm just going to attach that right to this vellum here. I just thought it needed a little something extra here. So by doubling it up, you get a nice full bow. And I'm going to go ahead and use that same adhesive to glue that down. And then I'll just put something on there and let that dry. You can just hold it for a second. But off camera, I put an acrylic block on there and I let that dry. And then I cut away some of the excess. So let's take a closer look at this finished card. So I hope this inspires you to pull out your gel pens and see what you can do with them. Again, I've found these particular pens to work really well. But take a look at what you have, and I really think it looks like kind of a faux glitter technique, which is really easy and quick way to do this. So if you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to visit me at pinkwhisperdesigns.com. Also hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. As always, thank you so much and have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.